My parents told my brother to take my house because I don't have a family. I'm a single man in my early 30s, and I've got a brother who's 29, already with 4 kids. He had his first at 22, then the second a year later, the third 2 years after that, and the fourth was just born a couple of months ago. His wife and I don't get along. She always tries to provoke me by acting superior, then turns into an extreme self-victimizing drama queen. If I retaliated even slightly, she could cry instantly and put on a convincing show to garner sympathy from just about anyone. My parents and brother absolutely adore her, even though they know exactly how she is and just don't care. She's very good looking, I'll give her that. But she's so awful I could never be attracted to her. She also refuses to get any kind of job, despite having a college degree, and my mother helps with the kids all day, so their finances depend entirely on my brother. This means they can't afford to live anywhere but my parents' house, and privacy is a major issue with all of us crammed into a 3-bedroom house built in the 60s. Growing up, my younger brother was clearly the favorite. We're 3 years apart, but he developed a superiority complex because I was badly punished whenever I retaliated against his antics. Back then, it was obvious my parents cared more for him. He got the lion's share of everything, unless someone called them out, which happened often enough from other family members. That's why my parents moved us about 150 miles away, so they'd only see us during holidays, since it was a 3-hour drive. My brother was physically abusive toward me on multiple occasions, flirted relentlessly with my first girlfriend to the point she broke up with me, and laughed at every misfortune I had. When I was upset, my parents just told me to suck it up. The only time I got equal treatment was when they wanted to keep appearances, like on birthdays or Christmas, when they had to treat us equally in front of relatives who loved gossip and drama. They did their best to hide what was really going on, threatening to take all my stuff if I spoke out. Honestly, they celebrated more when I turned 18 and moved out because then they no longer had to support me. I was still in high school when I left, and couch surfing was far better than living with them. Ever since, I stayed in low contact. They didn't even show up for my graduation, but I didn't care. From then on, I mostly saw them only on holidays, like the rest of the family. The start of 2020 wasn't kind to me. I lost my job, and with my roommate also unemployed, we couldn't afford the condo anymore. It was a rented 2-bedroom I loved, but as the lease ended, my roommate moved back in with relatives, and I had to sell nearly everything I owned to avoid homelessness. I really shouldn't have rented such an expensive place, but I liked the high life, until it turned into a nightmare. That's when I realized I should have just gone for something far cheaper to save more. I'd always loved trucks, so I bought a $1,000 camper in good shape and mounted it on my truck, planning to live out of it temporarily. That plan ended up lasting much longer than I expected. I initially hoped to stay at my parents' place, where my brother and his family still lived, but when I asked, they said the house was full and didn't want me there. Plus, we hadn't exactly been friendly over the past decade. They told me I could park my camper there if I paid them what it would cost to rent an apartment, an amount way too high just to park a camper. I was unemployed, trying to save what I could, so that was impossible. They called my camper an eyesore and told me to take a hike. We couldn't come to an agreement, and they thought it was hilarious that I had to live in a camper. My brother joined her in mocking me, calling me a homeless bum. I had to sleep in my camper in a store parking lot the first night I had nowhere else to go. I was terrified someone might break in. I didn't sleep well, there was nowhere else I could go. Other relatives with houses were far away, and all my friends lived in apartments. I was attached to my area and didn't want to leave, so I had my mail forwarded to a friend's place. Finding a stable parking spot was tough. I looked for a job similar to my old one, which took months of living the nomad camper life. I dealt with everything from beggars and drug addicts to people demanding I move because my camper was an eyesore. At one point, someone claiming to be with an HOA told me to move even though I wasn't parked on a street with houses. When I questioned it, they got belligerent and threatened me. To avoid more trouble, I moved my camper elsewhere. I learned to use a long extension cord to plug into random outside outlets for electricity, sneaking around to keep my batteries charged so my fridge stayed cold. I had a small solar charger for my phone, but no generator. Those are noisy and need fuel. After months, I finally got a new job in a neighboring city, avoiding retail again. I'd worked retail in college and swore I'd never do it again, but I had no choice. I was still getting unemployment, but with no stable place to stay, I didn't want to be jobless when benefits ran out. Plus, I was bored out of my mind, reading, watching movies on a portable DVD player, using my phone or laptop, and keeping track of parking spots and bathroom locations. Sometimes I envied how in Japan, they have public bathhouses, something we could really use here. When I finally got a new job, I practically lived in the back lot of the warehouse, in the farthest employee parking spaces, so far back they were nearly forgotten. My boss liked the arrangement because I was flexible, willing to take any shift, and he let me set up my camper in one of the spaces so I could drive around without it. Not sure if that was legal, but no one bothered us. I didn't deal with many trespassers, just a few, who security guards escorted out. I was almost always on call, working nearly every day. My boss let me plug my camper into the building for power and water, and I paid a small fee by working on Sundays when the office was empty except for the janitor and security guard. I had to shower at a friend's place or the gym since my camper had no shower and only a portable toilet I didn't want to empty. I used the warehouse bathroom at all hours, had a key, and I even became friends with the night security guard. Heating the camper in winter was easy with a small electric heater. Summers weren't fun, though, no AC, so I bought a used portable unit. I earned a lot of overtime, picked up new skills, and midway through the year, I got promoted to supervisor, making a better salary. That's when I decided I needed a real house. The scare of losing my condo made me realize I needed stability. I looked nearby, just 2 miles away, and found a 3-bedroom manufactured home on a small plot, which I managed to buy for $10,000 under asking. I used nearly all my savings for the down payment and got approved for a loan. No more living in a camper, I finally had a place of my own. There was space to back my truck behind the house and set the camper in the backyard, just in case I wanted to use it again. Once I was settled, I was foolish enough to brag about it on Facebook. My family saw the post, and that's where everything went sideways. A few weeks later, my parents, brother, and his family showed up unannounced, claiming they wanted a tour of my new home. I didn't even give them my address, so I have no idea how they found it. None of my friends or other family members had visited before, so maybe they stalked me at work or followed me home. I wouldn't be surprised. As soon as I opened the door, they practically pushed their way inside like they owned the place, acting like tourists. They started poking around, flashing that creepy smirk I later realized was a sign of their scheming. It made me furious, like a bull stung by a hornet. My parents kept talking about how much extra space I had now, and how it was too much for someone like me with no wife or kids. My brother kept saying there was more room than our parents' house, and my house was closer to his job. All red flags. Eventually, my brother asked to speak with me privately. Suddenly, everyone else left the room and headed out to the porch. That's when I knew they'd planned something. My brother said the house was too much for me alone and that I should let him move in with his family because his wife was pregnant with their 4th kid. He pointed out that my house was close to his work, and since I already had the camper, I could just live outside while they moved in. He never once mentioned paying rent. The guy's got a good job. He also started talking about changes, like curfews, and that I couldn't just walk in whenever I wanted without prior notice. If it weren't my brother, I'd think he'd lost his mind. Thanks to our parents treating him like he's the king of the world, he lost his marbles long ago. I tried to speak, but he kept talking over me as if I had no say. There was no way I'd rent my house, or part of it, to him. Maybe others, just to cover the mortgage better, but not him or his disgusting wife. I've seen this scenario online many times, in videos and stories, and never thought I'd live it because it seemed so absurd. But my parents, brother, and sister all fit the profile of entitled, narcissistic crazies. So I pulled out my phone and started recording. Ben just held on to it, totally unconcerned. Dan didn't even notice. He sat there waving his arms, listing all the reasons he needed my house, then suddenly acted like it was a done deal, reaching out his hand to shake mine. That's when I finally grew a backbone and told him, hell no. I said it loud enough that Dan stumbled back. I rarely raised my voice to him like that. Our parents punished me whenever I did, but this was my house. I stood up and told him it was not up for grabs, that just because they wanted it, doesn't mean they get it. I bought that house for myself, and it's not my fault he keeps having more kids and can't afford to move out. Dan got as close as he could without touching me, and said I didn't deserve the house, that he needed a better place for his family. I laughed in his face and told him that was total nonsense because I worked hard to buy it. Of course, I deserved it. He started yelling that I have no wife or kids, so I don't need all that space, that I should just give it to him. I told him I wouldn't give him anything, and he never even offered to pay me rent if I let him move in. I'd be paying the mortgage alone, with no way to live in my own house. He then said he shouldn't have to pay rent because his family comes first, and our parents said I was supposed to do this. I yelled at them as if their word was gospel, telling Dan they had no right or authority to give my house away. Then I barged back in, slammed the front door, and surrounded myself to force them out. There was a lot of yelling, but I summed it up. I told everyone they had no say over my life or house, and they should leave before I called the cops. Still, she loudly cried she was pregnant again, and I couldn't do this. I told her I did nothing to her. She just assumed she could take whatever she wanted, and I'd let her. I had no obligation to her or her family. Then I called her a stuck-up who never respected me. I said I didn't care what she thought or how many kids she had. I had no sympathy for her. She wouldn't be living in my house. That made her angry enough to attack me. She got in a good punch to my face and tried more, but my brother held her back. She kicked and screamed, demanding he let her go so she could scratch my eyes out. The phone in my hand recorded everything. I held it up and told them I'd call the police if they didn't leave right now. My parents told Dan they were leaving, and my mom said I had a week to come to my senses. I told her I wouldn't, and to not come back. I also told Sil that my phone recorded everything, and if she tried anything, I'd press charges for assault. She screamed and stormed out crying. My mom was the last to leave, telling me I'd better do this for Dan and Sil. I responded that I wouldn't be part of that story anymore. After kicking my parents' brother and Sil out for trying to force me to give my house to my brother, I immediately posted the story on social media. It spread fast, but I deleted it after a while, put my profile on private. I did it because I knew they'd try to twist the story, making me look like the villain. I had about an hour before they got back, and I had video evidence to back me up. Being proactive worked. Many family members supported me right away. My parents, brother, and Sil probably were ready to spin their own version, but it was too late. They didn't bother trying much. A few flying monkeys supported them, but most people knew how entitled and crazy they were. What happened was quickly understood and accepted. One person, I don't even know who, called me and yelled that I was a horrible brother and needed to make way for a real family man. I ended the call and blocked that number. A week went by. Then, my parents showed up again, Dan in tow, at my front porch, just like they said they would. They rang the bell like crazy and pounded on the door until I finally opened it a crack. They tried to shove their way in again, but I had installed latch chains and braced myself. My dad and brother demanded I let them in, but I said I was recording everything and would call the police if they forced their way again. My mom calmed them down and, in her sickly sweet voice, asked if I was ready to let my brother move in. I told her, and the rest, to go to hell and never come back. She fake cried, asking why I couldn't do this for Dan because he's my beloved brother. I laughed and told her I didn't love him, especially given how he treated me for years, and that they're terrible parents and he's a terrible brother. I told them to leave, and that I'd be calling the police if they didn't. I pointed out they drilled out my front door lock to break in, they forged fake lease papers, and I had recorded her attacking me. Those are felonies. I could have sued and pressed charges. If they didn't leave, that's exactly what I'd do. The only reason I hadn't already was for Dan's kid's sake. I gave them one last chance to leave. When they heard that, it finally clicked. They couldn't force me to do this for Dan. My mother surrendered and said she'd put an end to it. She went to Sil and whispered something. Sil started loudly crying, ripping up the fake lease papers into tiny bits and tossing them like confetti, until a cop told her to pick up the litter or she'd get a citation. Both cops looked at her like they'd had enough of this nonsense. Dan started telling his kids to load their stuff back into the truck. They were sobbing. The eldest kept crying he wouldn't get his own room anymore. Sil and Dan gathered the kids, trying to guilt me with the sad family routine. I swear they'd rehearsed it. The kids looked pleading, with trembling mouths. Sil kept rubbing her pregnant belly and tilting her head like a puppy. Dan looked as sad as he could, begging me not to do this. I didn't budge. I told them to keep packing, and I turned the crying up to 11. Dan yelled at me, "Are you satisfied? You've denied us a home because you're too selfish to share." I just started laughing like a maniac, and I told him that what he was trying to do was theft, not sharing. No amount of crying would make me give him the house. Because he's no brother anymore, just an entitled prick who thinks he can take whatever he wants, like when we were kids. He started cursing at me until the cops told him to cool it or he'd get cuffed. I asked the cops to stay until they left. They said they wouldn't leave until it was resolved. Soon, more police arrived, giving my parents extra motivation to leave. I made Dan give me the keys to the new lock I put on the door. He was reluctant, then threw the keys into the street and storm drain, telling me to go get them myself. One cop scolded him for that, making him fish them out. He got dirty doing it. When he handed them back, he grumbled and then slammed them into my hand. I told everyone to leave and never come back. My mother said I'd be disowned, as if that was a threat. I told her she could keep dreaming. I sarcastically said that now I'd never get to see my family for holidays, where I always get treated like trash. I reminded them how badly they treated me growing up, how if Dan ever needed an organ, I wouldn't give him a thing. Because I owe them nothing. I told them I worked hard to buy this house, and I'd never ask them for a dime again. They just stared like fish out of water. I kept going, asking what I could have done to deserve such horrible treatment just for trying to succeed. I said they wanted to snatch away everything I earned because they preferred Dan. I told them I bought my house with my own money, and I owed them nothing. I'd never be a doormat or a cash cow for them. No answers. Just blank stares. So I kept ranting, asking what in God's name made them think they were such good parents after all this. My father turned red, more from embarrassment than anger, and my mother cried she was a horrible person. I bluntly agreed, telling them they all are, and they'll probably go to hell. I said they were terrible people, everyone knew it. But if I called them out privately, instead of publicly, they'd just get mad and act like I'm the problem. They kept denying everything so long, it became part of who they are. My mother buried her face in my father's jacket, crying. My father looked more defeated than I've ever seen him. Dan and his family avoided me entirely as they finished loading the truck. I made sure nothing of mine was stolen, not that I had much furniture yet. They all got in their vehicles and stared at me with malice until my brother finally got them to drive away. As soon as they left, I posted everything online, spilling the story. They were too embarrassed to defend themselves that time. The family was somewhat divided before, but after that, it was a landslide. Almost everyone sided with me. Those who didn't simply stayed neutral. They couldn't keep up the "we did it for Dan" line anymore. No one listened. Any remaining family support evaporated. Even the former supporters, the flying monkeys, finally saw the truth. I offered to host half the family at Christmas at my new house. My parents weren't invited. I was surprised I wasn't blocked on my brother and Syl's profiles. Still had her fourth baby in early November. They're still living with my parents, and I think they knew I was watching because Syl kept posting passive-aggressive stuff every few weeks about not having enough space. Probably trying to guilt me still, and I bet it's driving my parents crazy. 3 loud kids, a mentally unstable Syl, my golden child brother, and a newborn. Maybe they should move into a camper in their yard and let Dan take over their house fully. Maybe that's the peace they need. Part 3 for those who say I should have just had my brother and Syl arrested. The only reason I didn't is because the kids need their parents, and if Dan got arrested, he'd lose his job, leaving his family with no money and a tiny baby. Neither of them needs jail. You don't need jail for revenge. Cops can help, sure, but I chose to get payback without involving the police. Would I be this merciful again? Probably not. They know it. I waited until after New Year to post, just in case. Sure enough, more stuff happened. As you know, Syl kept posting the same passive-aggressive nonsense, repeating how she was tired of living with my parents, how she needs her own house, blah, blah. I sound dismissive, but honestly, living through this with them makes you want to sarcastically play tiny violins. They're just that bad. I waited until January, then invited half the family for a Christmas Eve party at my house. Everyone I invited came, despite a 3 or 4 hour drive. They wanted to come, to support me. I was praised for how hard I'd worked and apologized for everything I'd gone through. Someone asked why I didn't just take my camper and drive back home. I sheepishly admitted I was attached to living nearby. My best job opportunities are here. My hometown doesn't have much in my field, and I wanted to make my own way. They accepted that, and we had a really nice party, probably the best in years. Some relatives even brought CDs of Christmas albums. My favorite was Ray Charles singing Christmas songs, unbelievable. It was a joyful time. For once, I could forget the past and just enjoy. But that didn't last. About 2 hours into the party, guess who showed up? My parents' brother and Syl, no knock, just walked right in like they belonged. I turned off the music and told them to leave immediately. They begged to stay, claiming they brought gifts. One of my uncles stood up and yelled at them, saying they didn't deserve to be in my home or my life after what they'd tried months earlier. He was backed up by other relatives. Keep in mind, this is my mother's brother. He used to love her dearly until he found out what they did. My grandparents, old as they are, hardly got involved, but they told my parents it's too soon to reconcile, and they've never been more disappointed in them. They'd hidden their favoritism from my brother for a long time, but no one was fooled anymore. They told my parents they need to seriously try to treat me like a son if they want back in my life. Then they turned to Dan and Syl and told them they'd seen all the passive-aggressive posts about how tired she is of living there. They told her to just let it go. My house will not be their new home. She then reverted to her usual crying and tantrum routine, claiming she should be the one living here, not me. She plopped into a chair, complaining it's unfair. I loudly pointed out she's a terrible mother, because she lets my mother do most of the parenting while she spends her days drinking, on her phone, or out spending Dan's money. I joked I was surprised her baby doesn't get drunk from her breast milk, given how much she drinks. That was probably a bit much. I got some stares and Sil demanded to know if I was calling her a bad mom. I said the evidence speaks for itself, and if she wants to afford her own place someday, she needs to get a job and save money. My brother's eldest, a 7-year-old, ran up crying, kicking and yelling at me for yelling at his mom, saying I made her cry and that I won't let them live here. That's when my brother pulled him away, but all the relatives jumped in again. It turned into a full-blown family intervention against Sil and my brother. She kept crying, her baby crying, the kids crying, even Dan looked nearly in tears from the verbal assault. He just sat on the front step, looking wrecked. Couldn't even look at anyone. If they weren't there to block him, I'm sure he'd have tried to order me around again, just like months earlier. By then, he'd been humiliated enough. His and my parents' reputation in the family was destroyed, the masks had fallen. Soon after, my parents' brother and Sil left defeated. The party resumed, and we avoided discussing what just happened. Most adults had been drinking, so everyone stayed overnight, some even in the camper. It turned out to be a good guest house. Everyone wanted a tour earlier too, and they couldn't believe I'd been living in it for 2 years. They asked what summer and winter were like. I was up early Christmas morning, with coffee and ibuprofen for the inevitable hangovers. A few had hangovers, I guess. I was complimented on being a way better host than my parents. We agreed to do it again next Christmas. But after that, Sil finally stopped making passive-aggressive posts and deleted all the old ones. Soon after New Year, she made a new post, claiming she tried to convince my parents to get a camper like mine, so Dan and his family could use the house as their own. The idea of her taking her own advice was amusing. My parents vehemently opposed it. No one's pushing them out of their home or master bedroom. That post was only up a couple of days before she removed it. She's hardly posted since. She loves to complain, but if a tree falls in the woods and no one's around, does it still make a sound? Seems like she's realized no one's listening anymore. Dan can't afford to move his family out on his salary anytime soon. If they expect another child, I won't be surprised. Things have quieted down for me since then. I've even invited friends over for poker nights, bad at poker because I can't remember the rules, but who cares? We drink beer, eat junk food, and act like idiots. Loaded up on Whoppers from Burger King, the way grown men do when they want a good, unfiltered time. Maybe in summer, I'll consider dating someone, fingers crossed. I'm not exactly getting younger. My camper just sits idle now, and I admit I've gone out there just to spend time in it. I lived in it for 2 years, my second home, and maybe someday I'll finally get to use it for what it was meant for, camping. I've never been camping, my parents thought it was a waste of time, so it's a completely new experience for me.